Tonight, new details on the rearrest of former Florida teacher Debra Lafave and the conversation she had with a 17-year-old female co-worker that could land her behind bars for up to 15 years. The now 26-year-old Lafave made headlines 3 years ago for having sex with her 14-year-old male student. She pled guilty to lewd and lascivious behavior, was sentenced to 3 years house arrest, 7 years probation. Now we know her probation officer says Lafave and her 17-year-old co-worker at a restaurant, quote, spoke about specific sexual acts with their boyfriends. And the young girl told the officer Lafave admitted, quote, they should not be talking. But a newly released 57-page probation report is littered with examples of good behavior by Debra Lafave. We'll debate this information in a minute. But first, we've uncovered more never-before-seen clips of Debra Lafave explaining how she wanted to avoid something just like this and how she was planning to get her life back on track.
So do you think it's fair? Do you think the deal you eventually came up with is fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I follow all the guidelines that, sex offenders follow. I can't see children. I have to stay 1,000 feet, or live rather 1,000 feet away from, churches, schools, which is, for obvious reasons, that's a good thing. Right. I follow those rules. I have that label, and if I was reckless and, violating my house arrest and going to bars, and that's one thing, but I was a law-abiding citizen, and I am again, and that's that.
So you check in with a probation officer every day?
Once a week, he comes by my house.
Right.
And once a week, I have to go to his office. So I see him about twice a week. And if I need something, of course, I call him. Or, he can stop by at any point in time that he wants to.
Right. House arrest. I mean, a lot of people, Debbie, probably thought you should be in prison right now.
Right.
And instead, you were under house arrest for 3 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Describe that to me. I mean, I think a lot of people think, well, that's pretty nice. You get to be in your house, and you got your TV, and you got your food, and the refrigerator, and so what's house arrest like?
It's more like I can definitely live without shopping and going out to the movies and socializing. Emotionally, it's very hard. It's very easy to get depressed, to have feelings of worthlessness, that you're never going to have the kind of future that you once had. I'm allowed to go shopping for necessity only, usually once or twice a month. I have to go to a class for sex offenders and work, and that's pretty much it.
You're allowed to go out in the yard? I mean, can you sunbathe? Can you do those things?
Right, yes. My parents actually put up a privacy fence, and it's pretty secluded. So, yes, I'm able to go outside, do gardening, yard work, what have you.
And part of the stipulations of your agreement that you made, you cannot go near schools. You can't really be near children within, I think, 1,000 feet, right?
I work at a restaurant, so it's impossible for me to dodge every child that, comes in the door. But I do not serve them, and I do not make eye contact with them.
So in other words, if a family comes into your section in the restaurant, and they're young kids, which probably happens all the time, you don't wait on that table?
Mm-mm. All the hostesses know that I can't wait on children. Or I don't even know if it's I can't wait on children, I choose not to. And they know not to seat them in my section.
Give me a sense, Debbie, of what these 2 years have been like for you.
Therapy. And more therapy. A lot of my freedom has been taken away from me, but I have grown a lot, and I have received the proper medication to balance me chemically, and I'm happy for the first time in a really long time.
So you're happy. A lot of people would find that surprising. You're happy. You're under house arrest. You've got probation following that. As you mentioned, your freedom has been severely limited, and yet you say you're happy.
Well, the lack of freedom, rather, has humbled me.
All right, joining me now, MSNBC senior legal analyst, former prosecutor Susan Filan, and defense attorney Nicole DeBorde. All right, Susan, look, she's been rearrested now, violation of the parole for talking to the 17-year-old at the restaurant she worked. Let me just read you, though, some of the things they say she did right. She wore a tracking device. She passed drug tests. She voluntarily surrendered her teaching certificate. She had no contact with kids on Halloween. She broke up with her boyfriend who had a young daughter. She tried to find work with little or no public contact. And they say it was determined that although Lafave has willfully violated her supervision, she is not an immediate threat to the community or herself. And yet you still think that this tiny little violation of her parole should lead her to have to go to jail.
Dan, it's not a tiny little violation of her probation. It's a big violation.
She talked to a 17-year-old at the restaurant.
The conditions of her probation say she can't have unsupervised contact with a minor without that minor's parent, who knows what Debra Lafave has been convicted of, giving permission. That parent was upset that her daughter had unsupervised contact with Debra Lafave. It's not Lafave's decision to decide if this is a stupid little rule or this is a technical violation or she thinks it's dumb that probation requires it of her.
So she should go now. How many years should she get now for talking to a 17-year-old coworker at a restaurant?
Dan, you know, you're really minimizing it. You're almost making a joke out of just talking.
I am making a joke out of it.
It's not funny at all because sex offenders repeat, and when they do, and sometimes they rape and then murder.
But
we all talk about
let me
how
repeat
the system failed.
She is not an immediate threat to the community or herself.
Dan, read the rest of the sentence, meaning they didn't have to pick her up right then. It got to wait till the morning when a judge signed it and she was arrested the next day. That's what they were talking about. It wasn't like she had a knife or a gun in her hand and a little boy locked in a closet.
You know, Nicole, I think this is the politically correct crew sort of run amok here. Oh, it's a violation of a technical violation of the parole, so she should go to jail for what, up to 15 years?
It's actually 30 years.
Exactly.
Actually, I think
that's pretty ridiculous.
I think actually, well, we'll talk about that later. But go ahead, Nicole.
Right. I mean, the reality is that every time a violator, a person who violates a probation or parole violates, and a judge decides that they have to go back to prison, that's at taxpayers' expense. And the reality is that if we're going to put someone on parole or probation and expect that they're going to be rehabilitated and go back into society, we have to give them the opportunity to be productive. And if that means that the only job she could get is being a waitress in a restaurant, which is the job that she has where they would hire her, then she needs to be able to do that job. And from time to time, she's going to have contact, unfortunately, with minors. And there has to be, at some point, some discretion used by the court to determine whether or not it's a violation that should require her to go back to jail.
Well, a judge signed the warrant, so the judge already thinks it's a violation. Probation thinks it's a violation. And this isn't just minor contact. This isn't like she accidentally waited on a child. Over a long period of time, she had unsupervised discussions about sex with this young girl. And don't forget, her mom had a right.
These are not serious violations in the sense
Parental
that
rights here, Susan, about whether her mom liked it or didn't like it, should have absolutely no impact on whether now she's going to have to go to prison for up to 15 or 30 years.
Exactly.
You think a court order is a joke. You think when the court ordered that specific condition of probation,
I feel free,
it's
Susan.
just silly
I feel free to criticize probation officers. I feel free to criticize judges, although a lot of the time I'm defending them. In this particular case, if a judge puts her behind bars for some significant period of time, and I mean more than a few days, then I will think it is ridiculous.
Right. Okay, so you think it's up to the person on probation to decide which rules.
Hang on, Nicole.
To put someone in jail.
Hang on, Nicole.
So, Dan, you think it's up to the person on probation to decide which rules are silly and which rules are good. And if they break one of the rules that they think is silly, then it's ridiculous for the court to punish them.
Nicole, now let me go to you, Nicole. What I'm saying is I think that it would be silly and ridiculous of the judge to sentence her to now say this violation, this particular violation, warrants any sort of serious jail time. Nicole.
Exactly, and that's why the judge has discretion. That's why there's a judge in charge of this process. And the judge is going to be able to weigh all of the facts, look at her in a totality, and determine whether or not she's been successful on this probation to date. And then he's going to be able to decide, is this infraction so serious that she should go to prison? And thankfully, he has discretion to make that determination based on the whole picture, not just based on this one incident.
Susan, you don't think all the things that she's been doing to try and follow the rules, the fact that she's been, we read the list before, irrelevant?
You don't get a medal for that. You just don't go to prison for that. She's supposed to. And there were periods of time during this probation, and I read every word of every note, where the probation officer said to her, do you know that you can't have unsupervised contact with minors? Do you know what will happen if you do? If you have any questions about it, call me. They went over this and over this and over this.
PC police run amok.
And then when he asked her about it, she wouldn't answer him.
All right.
It's supposed to be
Susan gets the last word.
What she did was
I'm giving Susan the last word on it. Susan, Nicole, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.